Vice President for Technical Affairs, Ron Reichert.
Thank you, Mike, and thanks everyone for attending today. We very much thank our presenter, Dacia Coffey. As Mike mentioned, if you're registered individually, you'll be receiving the PDH without doing anything else. But if you're part of a group, we thank those that are hosting the groups, and the site coordinator will receive the attendance acknowledgement for distribution to the group. The continuing education, this will qualify for 1 hour. This is part of the Texas section's goals, is to provide continuing education for the engineers. And we have changed things a little bit moving forward. We have made this, that's usually a charge to attend. We have made this free, and we have a sponsor for today, and that sponsor is Ameritex Pipe and Products. Ameritex, it considers the continual development of engineering skills and communication skills critical to moving engineers into positions of leadership and influencing in political outlays of financing and infrastructure decisions that are made mainly by non-engineers. And one of the ways to do that is to develop communication skills. And we feel we have one of the best people out there to help do that here in part one of a 3-part series. So we're glad and honored to be able to be the initial sponsor and to make this free for everyone to attend. And I know you're not here to hear me. So at this point, I'd love to introduce our presenter for today, Dacia Coffey, who's the CEO of the Marketing Blender, which is a leading authority on accelerating growth. Dacia is the host of the Corporate Caffeine podcast, a fractional chief marketing officer, and the CEO of the Marketing Blender, which is a business-to-business sales and marketing alignment agency. She's a member of the Forbes Agency Council and a Forbes contributor, and was named on American Advertising Federation's Shooting Star. Say that real fast 5 times in a row. In addition to her client work, she writes and speaks on how people can use their work and words to unleash their potential and change the world. And engineers need to be involved in that. And without further ado, live from the Ameritex studios in beautiful downtown Seguin, Texas, I give you Dacia Coffey. Dacia, take it away.
Thank you so much, Ron. Everybody, I am so excited to be here. And as Ron mentioned, this is part 1 of a 3-part series. And anytime I'm thinking about how do I bring maximum value, I want to be able to give you guys something that you can use immediately. And so that's why we are talking about persuasion secrets today. So again, thank you so much to Ameritex, which is, I am on site. And so, it is a dual honor to be a part of that and to be with you guys here today. So you already heard a little bit about me, but I want to unpack that just for 1 second about why I would be the person that might be able to help you unleash your communication and your influence potential. I have sold in very complicated environments my entire career. I have been in commercial construction, I've been in healthcare, I've been in fundraising, and now my agency supports people that sell and live and communicate in very complicated environments. And ironically, the more complex and the more educated and the more knowledgeable an environment is, the more difficult, the more encumbered communication becomes, because there's so much nuance, there's so much technical and specific factual information that has to be communicated. How in heaven's name do you wrap your arms around it, especially in a complicated environment where you've got political authority, you've got technical authority, you've got tactical and logistical authority, and all of this needs to be taken into consideration. How do you organize different agendas happening in your audience and in a communication? And that is exactly what we are going to hit square between the eyes today. Now, side note, the stuff I'm going to teach you, and don't tell your spouses, it works on them too. So I think you're really going to enjoy this, because this really is about creating influence, in mastering how to help people understand what you're saying and to unify your communication with what they want. Now, I love and hate this quote by George Bernard Shaw, that the single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. Now, I'm sure none of you guys have ever had this. Maybe it's just me, but you have a conversation and you are thorough. You prepared. You went through every little detail and you felt so good at the end of it. And then an hour later, or maybe a minute later, or a week later, you get an email where it literally knocks you out of your seat because your response to that email, the questions that they're asking or the points that they're making is, oh my gosh, they didn't listen to a single thing I said. And it is so infuriating, but also it's inefficient. You guys are incredibly busy. Your work is very important. Every decision that you are making is about fundamentally protecting, structuring, and underlying the community and the lifestyle of the people in the state. It's so, so important. So to be bogged down in this communication nightmare when you're actually trying to make progress, and where efficient communication is helpful to your career, but also to those that you're trying to collaborate with, it is absolutely infuriating, and we want to start getting away from that. Now, I do want to preface this also that you're kind of up against some additional challenges other than just the technical accuracy and the large amount of communication that you are challenged with managing. Unfortunately, you're not just competing with other firms or other prioritization. You are competing with, well, everything, because there's really a war on attention. And this war on attention is massacring our ability to understand one another. So what do I mean? What war on attention and communication are we talking about? Well, the average American is exposed to over 5,000 brands per day, you guys, per day. We're exposed to over 362 ads per day. We only take note of about 153 ad messages. Now, this is not 100% on the conscious level. I'm not going to go into the weeds on this one. We're aware of 86. We get over 121 emails for mid-management, 121 work emails per day. On average, the average adult American gets a minimum of 94 texts per day. If you're younger, it's way, way more than that, especially if you've got Slack or any other additional communication mediums in your workspaces. And to boil all of that down, we are so busy and we are so assaulted with communication every single day that on average, when a person looks at a website, just as an example, we are only reading about 28%. Do you know how much that is? It's a tweet. Do you know why a tweet is that number of characters? Because that's as much attention and time as we have to give before making a decision to move on or to click through. So there is a war on attention. And you know what? You can either complain and be frustrated by it, or you can use this knowledge to really harness and create powerful, impactful communication that actually aligns with the environment that you are functioning in. So I mentioned the tweet. 8.25 seconds is the average attention span. Back in 1920, the average adult attention span was 45 minutes, and in 1980, it was 20. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not that adults can't pay attention. Obviously, you guys are joining me on this webinar, and hopefully I will make it easy for you to pay attention. But it's not that we can't or that we won't. It's that we're too inundated. So we literally only have about 8 seconds to decide that quickly whether or not we are going to listen and engage with what's being communicated to us, or whether or not we are going to check out. Google actually defines the average attention span as just right around 4 seconds, slightly under that. And it's because the brain is processing too much information that we've got to create efficiency in the cognitive load that's actually happening with us. A couple other things. I already mentioned a number of emails, but people are, well, we used to be entrenched in traffic. All of that noise that's coming at us, not let alone the thinking and ideas. And it's so bad that we are eating at our desk. There's a horrible statistic that I did not put on this slide about how many of us bring our iPhones to the bathroom. Excuse me, but come on, are you really that busy? Anyways, how much time we are spending in meetings. I would actually challenge that now Zoom is the new norm for so many people. That number has actually gone up, and distractions are stealing over 2 hours a day of our time and of our efficiency. And what is that's based on is it takes about 11 and a half minutes, sometimes more, to re-engage in a task that you are interrupted. So bings and notifications and phone calls and knocks, you got a minute. All of this is actually stealing massive amounts of time that goes well beyond the actual time it took to address that.
Dacia, can I interrupt real quickly?
Please do.
We cannot see you.
Oh, goodness. Do you want to?
I think everyone would enjoy that.
All right, I am on my iPad, so let me try really quickly to see if I can make that happen, but I'm really not 100% sure. So bear with me, you guys, for one quick second
Hated to
while
derail you. There we go. We got you.
I know. Now I just have to figure out how to be able to show you my screen too. So I think I will probably just turn it on and off if that's okay, because this iPad does not want to be able to show both. So, but thank you so much. All right, so let me jump back in there for just a minute.
Sorry to derail things. I just wasn't sure how you wanted it to work.
No, I actually wish my iPad was allowing me to do that, and it's not. So, oh well. So I will hop in and out, but thank you.
Okay.
And now at least I know I can stop making funny faces at you guys. Y'all missed out on a whole bunch because I have a very loud face when I'm communicating. Okay, so any of you guys in business development, and side note, I would agree with Dan Pink, who says that we are all in sales nowadays because we're in a world where it's an idea economy, right? So we are all having to sell our ideas constantly. So this is about technical sales. So I'm going to give you some statistics, and these statistics are about how much influence is getting pressed down, really, is what I mean by this. So just so you guys know, buyers, or let's change that for this webinar, to decision makers, are 70% of the way through their decision before they meet with an influencer, before they meet with a representative of any sort of external agency. So they are doing their research online, they're talking to other people, they're looking at what other people have done. And so they are pretty much stacking the deck to decide, to predetermine what they're going to decide. And then when they talk to experts, they are using that to validate their preconceived notions or to change them. So this deck is getting stacked against you because you're being pushed to late research phases. We already mentioned how many people do research online. Of course, brand awareness is ranked higher than relationship now. Now, this can actually be applied to personal branding as well. We're going to be doing a session about that, because if you already have authority, or when people take a look at you or hear about you before a meeting, it dramatically changes the outcome and their ability to listen and pay attention and believe what you're saying. On average, most people are influenced by 8 other people in any sort of B2B sale. I would challenge it's probably a lot more for you guys. And so the amount of consistency and communication that has to happen across this consensus building environment is really, really challenging. Most decision makers are looking at over 10 sources of information for every single decision, and they're engaging with loads of content. And 73% of engineers research multiple vendors. I don't have to tell you guys that because that's what you're doing, but it's not just you, even though you guys have a tendency to be more analytical. But at the end of the day, that is my point, is that we are all in the business of selling ideas. And we are all becoming or entering being in the business of protecting our own influence and keeping things out so that we can hear ourselves think. And this is a complicated scenario to be in. Another little statistic over on the right-hand side, which is pretty depressing, is that in technical sales, actually only about 50% of sales reps hit their quota. And you can see that this is going back to 2011. So this is how much sales in the B2B space is getting challenged. On the left-hand side of the screen, you can actually take a look at what technical decision makers prefer, what decision makers in general regarding technical decisions is a better way to put it. So what are they looking at? They trust subject matter experts from their industry, and they trust third parties. So there goes that research. They trust past experience that they've had. Then they do check out websites, not because they're getting information from them, but to validate what they thought, or what they pre-believe, what their preconceived notions are. And then they trust in-person events. That has obviously been compromised. They trust their peers and colleagues. And then you can see it distills down from there. So there's a lot of places that they're getting information, and your communication on any particular subject is competing with all of that. And additionally, you're one person struggling to be in a one-to-one conversation. So the coverage of covering all 8 influencers and decision makers in any given is really, really challenging. So I hope I'm not depressing you guys by this point, because I know this is a lot, but I don't think it's appropriate to talk about tactics and action items unless you know the game, the field of play that you are actually on. And the truth is that communication is harder than it has ever been. But what that also means is that now, if you are one of the people that can hack the new system, that can understand it and understands the real rules of engagement, not the ones that we were all taught 10 and 15 and 20 years ago, but what's actually happening today, you have an advantage far beyond what you can possibly imagine, because this fundamental skill of being an excellent communicator changes the game because it's so hard nowadays. Now, side note, I'm kind of jumping ahead, but I want for any of you skeptics in the audience, because I've never met a skeptical engineer, anyways, which is good because that means you're engaging critical thinking. But what I want to tell you is this is not about being an extrovert. This is not about finding a style that is not comfortable for you. It's not about faking it till you make it, right? It's about changing the paradigm of how you use communication so that it is respectful of the audience and so it's respectful of your time and your expertise. So what do I mean by that? So obviously we are looking at a pretty funny slide about solving the wrong problem. Okay, so what wrong problem? Well, here's the deal. People come to me on a personal as well as an organizational level, and they say, Dacia, how do I become more influential? How can I convince people what I know? How can I prove that I'm an authority? How do I build subject matter expertise publicly so that people understand who I am? And those are good questions, but unfortunately, they're the wrong questions. And I know that probably sounds really crazy for somebody who is in marketing, but what the question you really should be asking when you're thinking about your personal communication is not how do you convince other people, but how do you help other people be successful? How do you align your point of view and your expertise with what they already care about? Because the truth of the matter is that your personal potential has nothing to do with how smart you are, has nothing to do with how talented you are, has nothing to do with how networked you are. Your personal potential will be unleashed because of your ability to transform the lives of others for your work, for your inspiration and your insights to be able to actually help other people achieve their goals. So the right question that you should be asking is, how do I talk to other people about what they want so that they understand when I'm sharing an insight, when I'm sharing my knowledge, it's 100% aligned with getting them to where they want to go. And you guys, I'm going to go deep on this subject because it sounds so fundamentally obvious, but it is not. This is the one thing people skip all the time because we have so much information inside of our own heads and we are so committed to getting it out that we forget to take into consideration the ears and the eyeballs and the brains that are actually listening. So let's talk a little about that.
Your slides are not full screen right now.
Okay, well, let's change that then.
There we go. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay, so, earlier I talked to you about who you're competing with, but guess who your real competition is? Your biggest, most ferocious competitor, where people can flat out not hear you because this competitor is so loud. Well, it's probably pretty obvious. It's what's inside of their own head. If you are not talking to somebody about themselves, they are listening to their own thoughts and they're comparing their thoughts to your communication, if you're even lucky enough for them to be listening in totality, to do deep listening. And we know how challenging that is. So that is really what you're competing against. Now, just to give you an example, not to throw all of us under the bus because we are selfish or self-centered. It's not about that. It's about the fact that we are in that war of attention. Now, to give you some details, our brains process 11 million bits of information per second. And we are keeping 99% of that out. And that is how the reticular activating system protects us. It's a massive filter so that we can drive down the road or have a conversation or finish an email, despite the fact that there's so much going on around us. So that's what you're up against. So you always want to make sure that you are focusing on the listener, exactly where they are at in their decision-making journey, their influence journey. And you need to be thinking about what is it? What are their preconceived notions? What is their background? What are their potential objectives? But you really want to do a deep dive anytime you're preparing a presentation to think, where are they going to be in their own heads? What are they already listening to that they're comparing my information to? So that was the slide that we were talking about in regards to how much information we're processing. So it breeds the question, well, if all of that information is being kept out, what actually gets in? Well, here we go. You guys are probably not going to be surprised. Only information that they already care about. Only information that's already in their head. So what that means is that every single person who's making a decision or trying to collect research and information already has a paradigm that they're thinking about, right? And they're already trying to drive to that, but they use very specific words to describe their problem. And if those words are not the same words that you are using to describe their problem, they will not recognize that you are saying something they need to hear. Our brain is filtering everything out that does not have relevance and importance in our immediate lives. So that's why it's not so important in your communication to know yourself, to know your differentiation, to know your authority. It's absolutely critical to understand how the customer, how the decision maker, how the person you're trying to influence is listening to information. So you really have to do some thinking about what are they trying to achieve and how they describe this. So I'm actually going to go ahead and I am going to give you guys a very specific tool that we use. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a second so you guys can see me. But I'm going to share a very specific tool. Ron, can you guys see me okay?
Yes.
Fantastic. Wonderful. So now we are actually going to get into action. That slide that I had just showed you guys, I want to warn you, maybe you guys have taken communication courses prior to this, maybe you haven't, but it's not just about what you say. It's also about saying things in the correct order. And so on that very first slide I had in that pink cover slide, I had showed some people basically doing something that looked like dancing. And it's because I call it messaging choreography, because a lot of us actually are saying the right thing, but we're saying it in the wrong order. And if you are not able to match your communication to where and what that person is capable of listening to from a psychological standpoint, you are going to be falling on deaf ears over and over. So the good news is that we are not going to stay conceptual. We are actually really going to go ahead and dive into exactly how do you change and tweak your communication so that people can hear you and align with you appropriately. So again, I mentioned this earlier, it's not about being an extrovert versus an introvert. It's simply about organizing the information that you're conveying into a way that people can actually hear you. So let's go ahead and jump back into the screen, into the slides so that you can see exactly what I am talking about. Here we go. So I'm going to skip that for a minute. We'll move straight into messaging choreography. So here is the order. I'm going to hack the whole entire system, and then we're going to go ahead and break it down. Now, one caveat is that a lot of us have been taught the exact opposite order, and this is a problem, especially when it comes to written communication, which marketing has a lot of that. So a lot of us are taught, hey, make sure that the audience knows who you are. Make sure that your listener believes in your authority, because this makes it easier for them to believe you. They already have confidence that the information that's being provided is excellent. And then prove it, right? Give an anecdote, tell a story, give examples of how you've solved the problem, maybe quantify the problem, right? And then you need to start customizing your objections or customizing your communication to handle objections. And so you're teaching people how to see things differently. And then you're making sure that you're mirroring them the closer they get to the decision. That is all good stuff, but it is in the exact wrong order. Exact wrong order. And so let's talk about that from a psychological standpoint. Earlier, when I was talking about the reticular activating system, the brain only listens to things that's already there. So the number one thing that you need to put into all of your professional communication, side note, all of your communication, always start with mirroring your audience. Now, what do I mean by that? Basically, you want to think, what do they already think? What are the questions that they are asking themselves? And more importantly, what is the emotion that they are feeling? How intense is this decision or this place that they are at? Because you guys, yes, they're making technical decisions, or they're making political decisions, or they're making, practical, tactical decisions. However, these decisions in this environment, sometimes people realize that this decision is about their how they're perceived. It might be about their career. It might be about their profit margin. It might be about their constituency. So there's always an agenda. Be careful of the word agenda. It doesn't necessarily mean it's bad, but there is always a point of view hidden behind any decision, and it's about ourselves and it's about emotion. Side note, from a psychology standpoint, decision making does not happen in the logic center of the brain. It happens in the emotion center of the brain. So decision making happens where we feel emotion, and then the brain afterwards engages communication and engages logic in order to wrap confirmation bias around the decision that we already made. So making sure that you mirror people is absolutely critical. Now, what does this exactly sound like? So it might sound like the subject line in your email is written in their exact words, so that you are not using your terminology, but you are conveying you're speaking about a problem or goal that they have. It is always the very first sentence of every email, every piece of professional communication, the first sentence of every ad, any headline that you ever do, the very first part of any presentation or lunch and learn that you ever give should be about your audience. It should be about what they're trying to achieve, or the challenges that they face, or how it feels to be in their exact scenario, because that's how people go, oh, the speaker, the communicator actually specializes in me. They are saying things to communicate to me that they understand where I'm at, and they understand exactly what role this information is playing for me. Oh, okay. And it literally triggers the brain to start listening, because the brain goes, oh, this is relevant information. I'm going to stop checking my email now. So that's the first part. So then the second part, so that is the mirroring. Then the second part is a little tricky, but this is perfect for you guys because you are subject matter experts. What you want to do is you now want to teach the audience something. Your real goal is to get them thinking, I've never thought of it that way before. Now, here's the interesting thing for you guys is you are actually trying to trigger their inner skeptic, especially once you start moving into influence. And here's why. Because if you're skeptical, it means you're starting to flirt with that part of yourself that is argumentative. But guess what? If you're arguing with someone, guess what you're doing? You are fully engaged. You are all in. Because for you guys, the worst possible thing that can happen to you in your communication is for them to zone out, for them to go, you're right. Yep, I totally hear you. Absolutely. That is a great point. Yep, great. Thank you so much for that 72 slide presentation I didn't pay attention to at all. But I am nodding and smiling. Guys, that is death to understanding and death to influence. You are not trying to be a nice guy. You are trying to be of service. Start with a frame that challenges their conventional thinking. And this sounds like communicate a risk that they're not aware of. Tell a story of something gone wrong. Communicate what's really at like what the stakes really are and align it back to that mirroring. So you already know what they're thinking, right? And then just help them make a good decision. Imagine if they were a very close friend of yours and you are sitting down across the table from them and you're giving them real advice about how to make a great decision. That is what should be next out of your mouth. And the reason is, no, this doesn't have to be long. It can be something very short, but it immediately differentiates your authority because you are in a point of view where you are aligning with them. You are metaphorically sitting on the same side of the table as them. You are advocating for them by starting with information that actually accelerates their ability to make a great decision instead of talking about yourself. You will stand out so far above other people and even so far beyond the voices in their own head, because this is so different than how we all naturally orient. So mirroring is first. Next is help them make a decision, teach them something of value to accelerate their ability. Now, side note, I'm just going to give you a little bit of hack because this can be a little tricky to figure out sometimes. Typically, the advice comes from 3 different areas of risk, right? So risk as in their career, something personal, something like that. So unnamed risk. Another place is places they're losing money or they're failing to capitalize on money. You can define money however you want per your specific information, per your specific scenario. And then the third is where are they losing time? And the reason why this is a hack, a way to help you figure out how to teach people how to make a good decision is because, again, emotion is at the center of the loss of any of this. Fear hovers behind the loss of money or the frustration of wasting time or the fact that we might have a risk that is unmitigated. There is significant emotion behind that, which helps people listen and it helps them understand that this is relevant to them. So that's the tip. Now, the third part is prove. Now, there's 2 different ways to prove something. Now, first and foremost, you are not proving that you are right. You are proving that what you're teaching them is trustworthy. The information that you just gave them to make a great decision is trustworthy. And there's 2 different ways to do this. Now, for you guys, you're going to love the first one. Use data. Use things that are inarguable, where you could basically say, hey, don't take my word for it. And you point to a study, you point to some research, you point to some information, you point to a case study, something like that, right? So you can use data. Data is good, especially if the audience are fellow engineers. But if the audience are people that are less analytical than yourselves, and most humans are like this, the real way to prove what you're talking about is to tell a story. People intuit and understand storytelling. Our brain actually, our memory center actually organizes all information into a story format, into a beginning, a character with a problem, a middle, and a transformation, a resolution. Even memory athletes, I don't know if any of you guys have ever come in contact with this or seen any of the documentaries about them, but when they are memorizing, the umpteenth digit of pi, or, this insane, lengthy, long memory competition, they're literally telling themselves stories and they're creating visuals and stories around every single mnemonic piece that they're trying to do. So it's absolutely fascinating. And it's interesting because if you are trying to explain something big and complicated, you don't need to use jargon to do that. Telling a story creates specificity that allows people to ask better questions. And you guys, honestly, this is another hack when you're thinking about putting presentation material together or when you're choreographing the order in which you communicate. One of your top goals should always be, how do I communicate this in a way that helps them ask the best possible questions? Because if you can create curiosity or skepticism in their brain, then they are asking you questions and now there's a dialogue and now you are literally, from a communication standpoint, on the same side as them, because you are exchanging information versus them just being in the silent space of receiving communication and you don't know whether it's working or not. So you are always trying to cue critical questions, critical thinking inside of their brains. And then the final part, now you can sell your idea, right? Because you've earned the reason to do that. you've mirrored, you've shown that you specialize in what they care about and who they are. You have taught them something about how to make a better decision and how to escalate or accelerate what they want, right? Then you proved that there is sufficient information or examples out there where they can believe what you're saying. And so now you have the permission. They will be curious. Who are you again? Okay, so what are you thinking? What do you recommend? This is automatically what our brains start to trigger once somebody has specialized so deeply in us. That skepticism that we are actually trying to pique makes us go, okay, wait, can I trust you? Who are you? And literally this happens naturally, or people get curious about you as the authority figure, bringing them really great insight and great information that is piquing interest from them. Now they want to make sure that you're the real deal. So awesome. This is exactly what we want to have, because now they're ready to listen to you. Now they're ready to listen to your opinion. Now they're ready to listen to your advice. And listening is half the battle, because if they don't understand and if they are glossing over what your recommendations are, they cannot take them. Simple as that. Okay, so getting closer to the end, I want to give you guys a few more hacks. I told you I wanted to promise a couple of immediate things, immediate takeaways that I want you guys to do. So the very first one is, you see these wonderful words. I love some of these words on here. I love the word strength. I love the word excellence. Character is an absolutely critical word that I think we should all be talking so much about, right? These words, take a screenshot of them, because I don't want you to use these words ever, ever, ever again in a presentation or in professional communication. And this is heartbreaking. But the war on attention has given these words the ability to give us all a superpower. And it's this one. These words turn you invisible. Because guess what, you guys, everybody says that their company or their organization or their ideas are founded in excellence. Everyone says we are superior. Everyone says we are leading. Everyone says we have the best service. Everyone says all of these things. You remember on this right-hand corner, the messaging choreography about teach? Yeah, you actually need to be differentiating and standing out in how you deliver your communication, because then you don't have to worry about explaining why you're better. They will already realize it, because no one else is acting in integrity like you are. So this is integrity and excellence and superiority in action. And it's as simple as putting your communication in the right order so that our brains can actually listen. Okay, couple more hacks. So you guys might be thinking, wow, how do I have enough time, especially when people's attention spans are so short, right? 8.25 seconds, or maybe I only have a 10-minute meeting or a 15-minute Zoom or 30-minute presentation to get through 2.5 hours of technical content. How do I actually do that? So the first thing is to remember that it's a pathway, right? And so you need to have one goal at a time. Your first goal is to make sure that they understand that you specialize in them. Your second goal is to take them one step closer to a better decision and more understanding. Your third goal is to give them examples so that they can trust what you're saying, right? So this can be broken up into different points of communication, like a timeline, right? So this might be an email, a follow-up conversation, because very few successful completions of projects or influence happen in a single conversation. That's just not how we work as human beings, right? So number one, you can chop them up into steps, because that's really what happens. But then the second one is about understanding how to tell stories. And so if you have a huge, huge, huge presentation that is absolutely critical, there is a great way to open up the presentation that helps people enjoy what you're about to say, helps people understand that you're mirroring in them, and gets them prepared for what's coming. And that is to tell a transformation story. So what is a transformation story? And side note, there is a form that you can fill out to help you organize this. And so you can get in contact with the guys in order to get a copy of this, or I can give you a link in order to download this for yourself. But what is a transformation story? So transformation story, if we are talking about typical storytelling format, remember I told you storytelling is related to how the brain receives and perceives information from a memory standpoint. It happens like this. There's a beginning of a story. Now, what is the beginning of a story, Captain Obvious? Well, the beginning of a story is details. It is, you know, in a specific environment like this, there was a character similar to you, audience member, engineer, that was struggling with this. It made them feel like this. They had a goal or a challenge like this. And you're giving an example that sounds very similar to the people that are listening, right? And then you say, once we helped them figure this out, or once they realize, fill in the blank, fill in the specific, you literally just build a bridge. The transformation story is, where are they now? You simply want to paint a picture that that problem, that challenge, that frustration that they had is solvable, and that they are in a different place because of your ability to guide them to a better decision and a clean, clear journey that led them to a better place. And so that is a transformation story. And so making sure that you nail the character, you nail the problem that they had, and then you nail the transformation that occurred. And by the way, you get to skip the messy middle, because guess what this does? People go, so how'd you do that? Yes, thank you for that question. Let's dive in and talk about how we were able to create that transformation story. And what that story did was it mirrored that you have an example very similar, and that you clearly understand have helped other people similar to them. So that mirroring is happening. You're teaching them and validating that their problem is solvable. And then you're moving forward and you're creating space for open communication and collaboration. And how did that get resolved? So that is probably the ultimate shortcut in regards to how do you start out. And side note, people just love stories. Like, who doesn't want to listen to something where somebody's actually telling a story? So that is definitely one of my favorite ones. And side note, little cliffhanger here, the next 2 sessions, you guys are going to get lots and lots of stories from me, lots and lots of examples of how this was implemented. So I know you're seeing my screen, so I just wanted to share one more thing. So I do have a podcast called Corporate Caffeine. We dive a lot into this. If you guys are curious about that, go ahead and scan that. Always looking for guests. So if you have any people that you want to share stories with, or you want to communicate that, please go ahead and let me know. And yeah, the final thing I want to let you know is, like I just mentioned, is that actually we do have 2 more coming up. And so the next portion of Corporate Caffeine is about you, right? So we are going to build upon what we talked about today, your messaging choreography. And then we're going to talk about how to really amplify your messaging choreography by building a personal brand where you are already stacking the deck in your favor, so that people are already curious about you and are already reading you correctly. And again, this is not about being an extrovert. This is not about looking like whiz bang, doo-wop smack, like you're the person. This is about you telling your authentic truth so that people can get excited, and that makes you trustworthy, and that they clearly understand how you help them solve their problems and why they want to invite you into their world and into their decision-making process. So we are really going to talk about personal branding that accelerates your success. So again, it's going to be stair step. We're going to continue to talk about the messaging choreography, but now we're going to talk about additional tactics that you can put in place in order to fire up your personal success. So with that, Ron, I am going to turn it back over to you, my friend, if we've got any questions, or if you've got any thoughts or any stories that you want to share with the audience.
Well, I'm going to address a couple comments and questions that popped up. Going back to your discussion about the opening sentence. There was first of all, it was called Brilliant. And their question was, can you give an example of, give us some examples of that?
Okay, so I will give you an example. It's outside of the engineering world, but it's the one that pops into my head first and foremost. I was working with a company, very large enterprise company, and it's their job in order to build these very, very complicated softwares to reach the executive level, the C-suite of other enterprise companies. So you guys think they're trying to reach out to people with the largest banks, the largest investment firms, the largest brands in the world. And it's not so easy to get that CEO on the phone. It's not that easy to get that executive director on the phone. And so what we did was we worked together in order for them to literally rewrite their emails. And it's as simple as this. They were saying, hey, we want to sell you this thing. Hey, our solution has accomplished this. Our solution, us, we, you can trust us. And we took out all of that. We took out all of that. And we simply created 2 different types of emails and that we tested and optimized. But these 2 emails worked across the board and we would just use them and customize them. But basically the subject line would say something about helping a similar person, in a similar role, or it would have the outcome that the people were thinking, or would name the problem in their exact language. I pulled out all niceties. Okay, you guys, first of all, this is going to frustrate some of you because it's stuff that we've been taught. Never open a sentence with, I hope you're doing well. COVID's been difficult, or the weather's been really crazy. No, that is a complete and total waste of their time. If you are trying to get busy people's attention, do not talk to them about stuff that they do not care about. You go straight to the heart of the matter. Now, if your personality is to wrap niceties around things because you're a genuine, caring person, put it at the end of the email where they can scan over it and just hit send or reply, because really it's about creating impact for people. And so you want to give them what they want. And so that's probably one of my most direct examples. And then the other one is kind of something similar to what I was telling you earlier. If you're doing a slide presentation, your first slide should literally either show bullet points or a picture of what you believe the audience is struggling with, like how you believe they perceive their problem. It should have nothing to do with anything except them. And so literally putting a graphic or a bullet pointed slide where it forces you as the presenter and the speaker to specialize in the audience and to put them front and center in your mind and in their minds, where they say, oh, I like this guy. He's talking to me about me. That's probably 2 great examples.
So just to find, we have a couple more questions, but I want to follow up on that one. So the tendency when people give presentations is that opening slide is basically this is me, this is my company, this is my position. You're saying do not do that.
Never. Put it at the very end, because guess what? If you got the meeting, they already know who you are. Like, they wouldn't have wasted their time. Put it at the end, because if you presented really impactful information, they will be curious about you. They will say that. And this happens to me all the time in my presentations where people go, wait, what's your background again? Or how did you learn this? Or, that kind of thing. But you want their curiosity to guide the discussion about you, because guess what? Who you are does not help them make good decisions. And that hurts, because we love to talk about ourselves, but it's just really wasting your potential influence. So yeah, thank you for that clarity, Ron.
All right, now to the questions. Some people have charisma and some do not. How does a person without charisma make the sale successfully? Okay,
first of all, go bigger in your boringness. I know that sounds absolutely crazy, but tell the truth early and often. You can use your natural tendencies to your advantage by saying, hey guys, like, it would actually be hilarious to start a presentation and say, just a heads up, I'm the most boring person I know. So really, I'm only going to talk to you about you, because anything else is going to be super, super boring. Also, anytime that you use your natural tendencies, your lack of charisma, and you're just frank about them, oh my gosh, like, of course they trust you, because you're being authentic. Now, that word a couple of years ago got so overused, but it really is powerful. When we think about the characters in movies, or the roles that we love, or the people that we follow professionally, or the leaders that we look up to, some of them are charismatic, but honestly, you guys, not all of them. And it's because if all of us were charismatic, wah. Like there's no impact. Like the world needs different people, different approaches to things, different communication style, because otherwise we can't differentiate between one thing, black and white, up, down, left, or right. So we need people to be themselves. And so just tell the truth about it. And that messaging choreography, I kid you not, if you talk to people about them, I mean, you win the day. And the number, and one of the other things is that being a deep listener, people that do not rely on their charisma have a tendency to be unbelievably deep listeners. So just get better at your questions. Ask amazing deep end questions. Don't talk about the weather. Don't try to be charismatic. Ask a question that you actually want to know about. You will blow people away that you are actually curious about what they really think about a real topic. I mean, even something as simple from a small talk perspective of what's the most interesting thing that happened to you this month. You force people to stop and think. I mean, and so if that, just find what's natural to you, just go bigger there, and really, really do not think of that as a weakness, but think of it as a cue to focus on your particular strengths and go big in those. It is your permission, if you don't have natural charisma, to really stand out in a totally different way. So I absolutely love, love, love that question. Thank you so much for that one.
And this one, the next question kind of ties off that, where you were talking about asking questions. What if you don't know the challenges or what your audience wants to achieve? Can you start by asking questions?
You can. I would, but I'm going to give you a caveat. You guys are really smart. You've been doing this for a hot minute, so you probably do know what their challenges are. And so I prefer a provocation versus just questioning, because some decision makers, especially politicians, especially C-level, if any of you are familiar with the DISC profile, they have a tendency to be high Ds, which means they're insanely impatient. They hate technical information. They want to know what, why not, and they want to move on, right? So if you're dealing with somebody that's a high D, and there's a lot of them in the business world and a lot of them in the executive spaces, then you want to make sure that you are accelerating the conversation. And so I am personally giving you permission to make assumptions. And then your question should be, do you struggle with the same thing? You could say, I've worked with a firm, or a group or a city council or this or that, and they struggled with this. Are you seeing that also? Or I've noticed this, or the media, not the media, but I mean like the engineering media, the thought leaders. There's a lot of conversation about this. Are you guys seeing that? Because people will either validate it, or even better, they'll say, no, actually, we look at it, and they will tell you immediately. Now, my cue to you would be to repeat it and then try to make sure that you are attaching your information to that. I also give you permission. If it's something surprising, write it down. Like, show them that you're listening. Like, make sure that your follow-up communication is directly dead center, bullet through the center of that circle, that you are focusing only on what they care about and how to help them solve their problems. So in all your communication, make sure you're using their exact words, and ask for permission, write it down, because that alone will blow them away that you are truly aligned with what they're happening. So I hope that helps. So throw a little caveat your way. So yes, I love questions, but they need to be deep end questions, not shallow end questions. Like, you guys are way too smart to be like, so what are you guys seeing? No, you've got to accelerate past the shallow end questions.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next question. This approach seems to be predicated on the assumption that the person, business you're engaging is in the market for the product or service you're providing. Would it be correct to say that the choreography you discuss is best used for positive leads and less effective for unsolicited cold calling?
Really, really great question. No. So it's 100%. So mirroring, if you do any sort of cold calling, mirroring is the only thing that will get people's attention. The only thing, whether you're using a mirroring story, a transformational story, or mirroring saying, I've solved this problem, or, I see this problem in the market. It is the only way that cold calling works. And I work with loads of organizations where we write their scripts, where we write their cold calling piece, where we help them navigate this cold calling war on awareness, war on attention type of thing. So no, it's really, it goes back to what I said earlier about breaking these pieces up and assigning them to the proper place in the order, right? So you can't skip mirroring. Sometimes mirroring happens and you have follow-up. And so then you're allowed to mature, the kind of content that you're providing, but definitely not. The other thing is that this actually applies to conflict management too. So for any of you guys in teams, especially remote teams or with a different range of personalities and backgrounds and ages, this is excellent for team collaboration. And so it actually applies across the board. If you're dealing with any sort of influence where there is going to be dissonance or differing points of view as you move through decision process, which basically is all of the work world normally, in order to come to a really sharp decision, it's still the same thing, because in conflict management, one of the absolute rules is, number one, always help level set that you are on the same team, that you are going for the goal, and that you still respect and see that other person as a human being who has a valid point. Like, you're validating them and making sure not to harm the relationship or harm the unity, even though you're giving yourself permission to disagree with what they say. So you're separating their identity from the content that you're going to provide that might be different from them. And then you go straight to facts as well. So it's actually very, very similar, because mirroring in a heated environment is about that other person. And then on top of that, about stating things that are inarguable facts versus getting straight into the emotion of things and your point of view, which is the selling side of that. So you want to make sure that you're staying on their side of the table. So really, really great question. Definitely deep end type of stuff, because, that is where it starts to get complicated. But honestly, putting mirroring out there as an example and trying to think about how you can help people make a better decision, the feedback and the response you'll get will teach you so much about how to implement your personal style inside of this consistent framework.
Yeah, I know it's 1 o'clock, but there's one more question here, and I want to tell you, you're kind of sliding off screen a little bit.
Ooh, thank
but
you.
This next question is really important, especially in the engineering community, with so many students coming from countries not being American citizens or not being born here. The question is, what do you advise about accents and lack of fluent English when need to search for words and trying to be slow enough to be understandable?
Oh my gosh, I love this question. I've worked and mentored a lot of people from other countries. Don't apologize, starting with to yourself, but also to your audience. Stop making that the center of your attention. Your accent is not hurting you. It's not hurting you. It can help you, but not if that's what you decide to focus on, because it is very evident when you're talking to someone and they are so, I'm sorry for this phrase, but they're insecure about something. It's very evident that all a person is thinking about is that. So for instance, I watched a video of myself one time, and it was from a number of years ago, and I played with my hair the whole time. It was awful. It was so painful for me to watch myself. And I remember what I was thinking. Now, I had no idea that I kept doing this during the webinar, but what I was thinking was I did have a lot of insecurities about how I looked, and I hadn't done a lot of screen time, and, I was trying so hard. But honestly, it was so evident that I was thinking about myself instead of caring about my audience. And it came out in these subconscious ways. But we are very, very sophisticated listeners. All of us, our powers of perception are insane. And so you've got to make sure that you are centered on a servant leadership platform. And that means you care more about helping the person in front of you than whether or not your accent is hurting you. And it changes the game. And then also, I want to, I want you to consider like the benefits of having an accent or, speaking slowly because English is not your first language. Number one, it creates space for you to be a deeper listener. It automatically creates space for that person to communicate more. You are not immediately jumping in with what you wanted to say. You're less likely to interrupt. You're more likely to ask clarifying questions and to go deeper and to make sure that you 100% understand the person. At the risk of offending most of us on this call, do you know what lots of Americans are terrible at? Listening, clarifying, making sure we understand. Like, we have a tendency to be really impatient communicators. So back to the question earlier about a lack of charisma, there are huge, massive, important blessings and strengths found when you have a limitation somewhere else, because it forces you to lean into other areas that most of us don't. And so I would encourage you to really, really reframe how you're thinking about that. And then on top of that, are you kidding? Do you know what kind of wicked, brave, courageous spirit and like amazing intelligence it takes in order to do all of your education, your fundamental formational learning in a different country, and then come here to create value? Like, it's already going to work to your benefit if you let it. So yeah, I would just encourage you just to stay strong and just jump into a confident place where you have servant leadership point of view at the front of it. So love that question. Thank you so much for giving that question. I love that one.
Well, thank you, Dacia. I don't see any other questions for you, and we are a few minutes over. So with that, I want to thank everyone for hanging out and listening to Dacia today. I think it's fantastic information, and it can really help our profession. I hope you all find it as beneficial as I did. Just again, individual registrants will receive your attendance acknowledgement. If you're part of a group, it'll go to the group. I want to thank again Ameritex Pipe and Products for sponsoring this and making it free for all to attend. Join us, check the website for future webinars. Dacia, the date of your next webinar is when?
Oh, goodness. Put me on the spot.
It's in March. I know I should know it, but maybe Mike has it. That's it. Let me throw it to Mike and put him on the spot. Mike, I'm going to let you wrap up.
March 22nd. There we go.
March 22nd will be part 2. Yes.
Yep.
And with that, Mike, I'm done on my end. Anything you need to wrap up with?
No, not much. Like you said, thanks to everybody for taking some time out of your Tuesday and joining us. I'm going to go ahead and close this session now.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.